Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the DataKind Meetup.
Woo!
Thanks. Yeah, it was pretty exciting. You may have noticed that I'm not Jake Corway. Yeah, sorry to disappoint you, but Jake is off on the other coast having amazing adventures for the good of the world, I'm sure. And he asked me to step in and MC this event. My name's Hillary, and I will speak as little as possible. I will just introduce people. We have a great program for everyone tonight. Let's start by thanking sponsors, so AOL and Green Plum. I love this format of having the beer before the talks, and so I hope you have been enjoying, and please continue to do so throughout. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I've been told by Jake repeatedly in several 10-minute voicemails, as well as emails, as well as many other formats, to remind you that DataKind is hiring. And the DataCorps is awesome. You're going to hear a lot more about that shortly. So to get us started, we have Noel, who's going to talk about Code for America. Then we have a couple other 5-minute talks, and then we'll get to the main event. So Noel, come on up.
Hi. So I'm going to subject you to something that I haven't done before, which is a completely new presentation. So please excuse me if I go a little bit over 5 minutes, hopefully not. Afterward, I will probably be drinking some wine, and these two guys here with the Code for America shirts will be able to talk to you coherently. I will probably not. As you can probably see, I'm very nervous, so please excuse me if I fumble through this.
Don't be nervous.
Huh?
Imagine us naked. You're awesome.
No, thank you. I'd rather just imagine the joke, what did the O say to the ape? Yeah, okay. So I'm here to talk about 4 freedoms, and I'm going to try to be a little quick. Is there a timer that I can put on this? No. There we go. Thanks. Okay, I just started this. So I'm a huge fan of DataKind. I get to work with them at Blue Ridge Foundation in Boron Hill, Brooklyn, and we all share a pod. It's kind of awesome because we're all nerds. I'm honored to be here, and my name is Noel Hidalgo. In the flesh, I'm known as Noel or Noel, and on the internets, I'm known as No-Neck. You can call me anything you want, just don't call me maybe. For a little bit of background, I settled in New York City 8 years ago, and I have been in and out of government institutions, but I've been in and out of government institutions in a good way. In the city, I organized the Open New York Forum, and since 2009, we have dedicated ourselves to 3 values: civic technology, open government, and building platforms for engagement. And I'm privileged to work for Code for America's Brigade program, and I'm the New York City program manager. And the Brigade program, for those of you who don't know it, it is a very unique program. It's a national organizing force for local civic engagement. And I am the luckiest person because I get to focus on only New York City. This city, New York. But enough of that, and I'm here to talk about a really cool thing that's going to be going on this year. So, how many of you know that this year is an election year? Raise your hands. Okay, great. Now, how many of you are registered to vote in New York City? Okay, smaller number. And how many of you can actually, collectively, name a candidate that's running for one of these positions? Raise your hand. Okay, great. So this is a pretty unique year because all of your tax dollars are, how do I put this, subject to termination. This is the first time in well over a decade that the mayor, the public advocate, the comptroller, the city council speaker, half of the city council, 3/5 of the borough presidents will all turn over. That's pretty much all of New York's major elected officials, minus the ones that are in Albany or ones that are in Washington, D.C. This is a monumental election that we should definitely pay attention to. And if you're into politics, I'm sorry about that, but this is kind of like what I do my bread and butter in. Never in the city's history will we, the nerd community, have more opportunity to impact the destiny of New York City. This year, as we prepare for another storm, because we know that there's going to be another 100-year storm that hits, we should be preparing for ourselves for a slate of elected officials who will not know the difference between a server and a waiter. With Bloomberg, we were lucky. We got a mayor who fancied himself a technologist and hired smart, innovative, and passionate people to prepare our city for the 21st century. And one of them happens to be here, and if there are other city people, thank you for your service. I love you. At the end of this year, all that passion, all that insight, and all that innovation may be lost to history. This is our time to say what we want from the 21st century and to have our values of democracy and equality be baked into the technology that governs us. In a parallel to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 1941 State of the Union, we must break from the technology industry's tradition of non-interventionalism and intervene on the behalf of the future. In 1941, the State of the Union address, in the State of the Union address, FDR outlined the benefits of democracy as economic opportunity, employment, social security, the promise of adequate health care, and human security. He later enumerated these 4 fundamental freedoms as the freedom of speech and expression, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. These 4 freedoms are at the foundation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But what are our Universal Declaration for the Commons? Is it the freedom to connect, the freedom to learn, the freedom from tyranny, and the freedom to innovate? Over the next year, the Open NY community is going to do just ask those questions and engage and answer what is the future? What are our 4 freedoms for the 21st century? So on first, we're going to outline an agenda for the future leaders of the City of New York. Second, we're going to engage in big apps. Yes? How many of you know what big apps is, by the way? Cool. So for those of you who don't know what big apps is, it is a apps competition that has been funded by the City of New York and the Economic Development Corporation for us to use municipal data sets to encourage you to start businesses. This year, we're actually changing the format just a little bit, so that way we're doing community development as well as economic development. We're taking a look at government data sets that'll be coming from the city, which actually Andrew Nicklin up here in the pink is responsible for. So all of our city's data is pretty much in this guy's hands. I hope he wears a motorcycle helmet every time he gets on that bike. And we're also compiling that with, for those of you who own businesses, who have data feeds that you want to incorporate into apps challenges, we're broadening the program so that way it's a combination of private data sets and public data sets. So, questions later. Big Apps is happening, and we're going to prove that we, the community, are a bridge to the future. Lastly, we're going to work to educate them, and I ask that if you're interested in learning more about this, join us February 12th, where we will have this discussion. It's going to be a workshop, and you will learn all about what the 4 freedoms are and how they relate to the future of New York. Thank you.
Is it the 12th or the 18th? The 18th is a Monday. And also the Open Active Meetup.
It's the 12th. Can I edit this slide? I think that bit.ly link is still good, so thank goodness for bit.ly. Yay, bit.ly. All right, so that's it. What's the format? No questions, right? Or are there questions?
No questions now.
Okay, no questions now.
Find him later.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Mike Dewar, who is going to give you a scintillating and excitable talk.
Okay, thanks. So while I just plug in, I'm one of 3 quick talks you're going to hear this evening that are the first of 3 projects as part of the DataCorps project for DataKind. So we're going to be doing some longer form projects as part of DataKind, and it's the first of we're the first 3 of these longer form projects. So we're the guinea pigs, so we're busy getting things. At least I talk for myself a little bit wrong sometimes. So, as Hillary said, my name's Mike Dewar. I'm a data scientist at the New York Times R&D lab. And I'm going to be introducing a new project between DataKind and Medic Mobile, which is Medic Mobile provides a communications platform for community health workers who are working in developing countries in rural areas. It's based on SMS text messages. It's got a kind of slightly radically distributed CouchDB backend. I'm going to try and tell you about two things this evening. I'm going to tell you about the kind of communications problems that we have trying to work as a DataKind project with an NGO like this, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we hope to get done over the next couple of months. So, Medic Mobile goes out into the world and tries to figure out what good it can do in these kind of rural, developing countries to help community healthcare workers. They send people out into the field, they analyze these really difficult societal problems and try and figure out how a little bit of technological intervention can help. I, on the other hand, commute from Brooklyn to the New York Times and think about how people read the New York Times. There's an obvious mismatch here where I have absolutely no idea what's going on in the kind of arenas that Medic Mobile are working in. So we have this communications problem. The first thing I want to say tonight is that Medic Mobile have figured out a way of talking to people like me, which is fantastically useful, and I want to sort of tell everybody this before I internalize it and forget how useful it is. So they've got 4 main use cases. They're interested in pre- and postnatal care. They're interested in vaccine tracking, along with a company called Nextleaf. They're interested in keeping track of stock in community healthcare centers, and they provide a kind of general messaging platform for healthcare workers and community centers. What they do is they go into these situations and they draw these use case diagrams. So this is just cycling through 4 of them. These use case diagrams are absolutely gold dust to someone like me. To me, these things are like social science circuit diagrams. I can start to understand these very difficult situations in something that I understand. So each of these arrows in these diagrams represents data in some way. So I can start to ask questions about the data that they're collecting. I can ask them how they're collecting it, who it's useful to. Oh, hello. Sure. Sorry, I was just yelling. So yeah, all of these arrows represent data. And so I can ask where that data is stored, how it's collected, who it's useful to. And without these kind of things, I would be absolutely lost. I have no natural intuition about pregnant people in Kenya. So it's really important, I think, for us to realize that we don't have this natural ability. And I just wanted to say these things are absolutely fantastic. So the second thing is about what we're going to be doing for the next few months. Medic Mobile are collecting a lot of data, and their theory is that because they're collecting so much data, they should be able to talk about impact, the impact of the interventions they're making in these communities in a clear and quantifiable manner. So the project that we're going to be working on in the next couple of months is about taking the data sets that Medic Mobile is collecting, pushing them through models available in the literature, and then trying to understand how we should best report and represent the results of the modeling, how to report and represent the behaviors that we're tracking, and the models that we're using to derive impact. I should say Medic Mobile's data is, like I said, quite radically distributed. They offer some installations where the CouchDB backend never ever talks to Medic Mobile. They're completely unconnected to the internet. They have some installations that do synchronize with the Medic Mobile mothership every now and again. And then they offer kind of hosted services where they can track every little message that's being logged. So we have difficult missing data problems. We're going to have quite, from the looks of things, difficult time modeling this stuff, and then there's going to be some really interesting visualization stuff. So it's the whole gamut of data science, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if anyone has any questions or any suggestions or wants to get involved, please do come and say hello. with that, I'll hopefully see you again in a few months to report back on what we get done. Thanks.
I've always wondered how to draw a pregnant stick figure. So before we move on to our next talk, how many people here are data scientists? Right, and how many people here are engineers or other technical folks? Sweet. How many people here work on policy? How many people are business people? All right. So you have a good sense of the people in the room. So to talk about our next project, I'd like to welcome Cathy O'Neil.
Hi. I'm just going to squish this over. There's like a pile of Max over here. And where's the... There.
If I juggle with it while you do this.
Yes, that'd be great.
Actually, can you find the collector down from that pile of Max? Handle of Max?
Okay. So I'm Cathy. I'm a data scientist. I've been with DataKind back when it was called Data Without Borders. And I was a data wrangler at one of the first, maybe the first data fest. We worked on stop and frisk data. It was really fantastic. I learned a lot. And I just fell in love with DataKind, and I also fell in love with you guys. The intersection of nerd and activist is always like the sweetest, awesomest people in the world, so thank you. So I have volunteered with DataKind to work with the Sunlight Foundation to think about how money influences politics. And I've been working with Lee Drutman over the last couple of months trying to set this project. We recently set up this wiki, and this was in advance of the Bicoastal Data Fest that happened at Columbia this past weekend, which was actually to explore money in politics. You might have heard of it. And some of you guys were there. So in anticipation of that, Lee and I had a meeting last week, and we just broke it down to, like, we had like 8 questions, if you can see those, that we really needed to get done. And most of them, as you can see, are like, they're called follow the money, follow the legislation, follow the lobbies. They're basically data. We need to put all this crappy data in one place. And a lot like we just heard, like the most important projects have crappy data. That's not a coincidence. The most important, and this doesn't happen to be in, we're not talking about pregnant women in Africa here. We're talking about our politicians in this country. There's a different kind of reason why the data is so hard, which is that people have vested interests and to not let people see into their data. So the sort of one of the oldest tricks in the book is to show some of the data, but not enough for you to actually get a handle on, and then keep doing that and figuring nobody would ever do the work of putting it all together. That's what we're doing. So if I can go over here, this was the web page of projects from last weekend. This is just to give you an idea. And by the way, I'm not going to lie, I'm trying to get people to work with me on this project. So please come up to me afterwards if you're interested. We really need help. Not only from data people, although we do need a lot of data cleaning and munging, and we need engineers, but we also need politicians. One of the things that, going back to this for 1 second, one of the things I didn't know before I talked to Lee Drutman, who's an expert in this stuff, is that it's really not hard to predict votes. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. It's not that hard to predict votes. What's hard is to predict, and where the magic happens in politics is what bills get introduced and which bills get voted on. And when something doesn't get voted on, the language in that bill could still be put into an omnibus bill, which then does get voted on. So there's all sorts of things that seem kind of impossible to track, but if you think about it as a nerd, you realize they're not completely impossible to track. So the 4 things that politicians actually do that we can keep track of, they do lots of secret meetings that we don't keep track of, is they introduce bills, they co-sponsor bills, they speechify on the floor, and that's all recorded, and they vote for bills. The voting for the bills is actually the least interesting one. So I encourage you to Google for Bicoastal Data Fest and look at all the different project pages that people had. I just want to give you an idea of what we were talking about. Somebody did something about who's playing hooky, basically looking at and this is not really a beautiful data set yet. It could be turned into something like who doesn't actually show up for the votes, which politicians. This is a cool one. This is, and I'm not even going to take the time to get my screen the right size, but the idea here is you have a given politician, and you're going to see what the insider trading was for that politician when he took office. You know how there's just now a bill to make it illegal for politicians to do insider trading based on their insider knowledge of companies. Well, we're going to see how much this is aimed to shed transparency on how much people have actually made money, how much money they've made based on their insider information, because that is to some extent kept track of. And I wanted to say that the best of all the projects have GitHub accounts. So a lot of these projects will have GitHub accounts. You'll be able to actually look, so there's it's not lost. A lot of this is basically parsing data. There's a lot of, and I'm not going to be able to say all the different fantastic projects that happened over the weekend, but where did Tom go? Oh, Tom had the most spectacular one, as I heard, because I didn't actually go to the presentation, but my husband was there taking notes, and he had the most number of cools with exclamation points next to his, because he had something about the congressional records set to music. There was a lot of people, I think Kevin over there, who has a GitHub account for his stuff, his work, he decided to try to track when a certain paragraph in one bill gets moved to a different bill. Other people were looking at local politics, like statewide politics, and found lots of the same exact wording in different this kind of gun control bills introduced at the state level. They were all exactly the same across different states. Really interesting things. I'm just pointing out there's a huge amount of stuff to work on with the political data. What we're interested in with the Sunlight Foundation is actually measuring influence. How does money influence politics? It's not going to be a snapshot. It's going to be over time. You're going to have to see a politician coming into Congress the first time and hopefully not being bought yet, and how they do or do not change their behavior based on the presence of money. And anyway, come to me if you're interested in helping. I think it's a really interesting and important project. Thank you.
I don't know who could not be interested in helping after that. So our last short presentation is by this guy, Max Shron. And I'll leave you to do this the proper way around.
I'm actually going to have to grab the charger because the person after me is using the same laptop and the charger doesn't fit.
Oh, mine's down on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Thank you.
This is all because Apple requires you to pay $10 for that little dongle.
Where is the here it is. So while I'm getting set up, just give a bit of background on who I am and what project I worked on. Sorry, I'm working on. My name is Max Shron, and I'm a data strategy consultant here in New York. Can everybody hear me in the back? We good?
Keep talking to the mic.
Okay. So the project that I've been working on now with DataKind for about, let's say about, oh, is that not the right size? For about 2 months now. It's a project with a group called Refugees United. And Refugees United is a nonprofit NGO based out of Denmark, and they provide a mobile website and SMS gateway that allows refugees to contact each other when they've been separated. So it lets people put their own information in, put in information, help them find their family and friends. And they've got a whole bunch of successes they've had reuniting people. One of the great parts of working on this project is about once a week I get an email from their press person saying, by the way, we had another reuniting, and there's probably plenty they don't track, but they know that there have been a whole lot of people out there who have been separated. They're in different refugee camps. Maybe one of them is still in a camp and one of them is now emigrated to somewhere in Europe or America, and they reconnect through the site. Part of why I got brought onto this project is I used to actually work at a site with similar functionality, but very different, which was an online dating site. And obviously it's a completely different kind of problem, right? But at the same time, there is this connection of you have a profile about yourself, and your goal is to find a very certain person. In this case, the people you're finding are your family and friends. But even though the domain is very different, and obviously this is a much more important project we're working on, some of the same kind of things have helped transfer over. So just to give you a little sense for what their site looks like and get a sense for what kind of data is available. So this is, when you visit their site, you actually get in, this is what it looks like. And it's a site that's designed to work on old feature phones from the mid-90s, which are often what's available in some of these countries. What Refugees United does, in addition to making this available freely to anybody who has their own phone or has SMS access or has the web access, is they also partner with organizations that put these phones in special spots in camps, so that when the refugees are in the camp and they probably don't have their own phone, they can come and register themselves and hopefully afterwards be able to find their friends and family they've been separated from. So this is an example of what my profile looks like. Obviously, I didn't fill it out. I'm not a refugee. No one should be finding me. But this is just to give you a sense of the kind of things that they're asking about. First name, last name, nicknames, other information. They see things like maybe you mention your favorite music, or if you're missing certain people from your family. And the hope is that other people will do searches like this and put in a name, put in a place, and get reconnected. See the phone number or email address, or send a message through the system to get in touch with somebody and hopefully make a connection and find people who you knew before you were scattered to the winds. So the data they've got is essentially all of these searches, all of these profiles, the messages that are sent on the site, access, what message has been read, that kind of thing. One thing that's very interesting with these guys is they're very, very, very careful about who has access to the data. So unfortunately, unlike the other organizations that are asking for help, I can't really have anyone else help with this right now, because if this data was to get out, there are some people who are refugees because they come from parts of the world where they're from persecuted groups. And so the data is actually fairly sensitive, that you're allowed to search for people, but they really don't want to make it very easy for somebody to reverse engineer this data and go find somebody and maybe track them down or their families down in another country. So the immediate project that we're working on is a project on just getting a better sense of where the data is going, almost like a dashboard. They've got a basic one now, but the very, very first project we're working on is helping to understand how effectively people are messaging each other, how often people are actually reading the message they get. This is a big problem. Someone will send a message, and a lot of times nobody will ever receive it because the person they send it to was registered at a camp somewhere and never gets access to the phone again. So they're trying to figure out, they're not really understanding it, how to track all these things. That's the first thing we're working on. The second thing, which is I think going to be a more interesting second phase project, which we're going to get to hopefully in the next couple of months, is right now, in order to use the site, you have to get on there and you have to actually search and you have to find somebody and message them. Wouldn't it be great if when someone signed up, we could recommend some people that they might have known, or if you search for somebody, say that I search for Mike Dewar, and then Hillary searches for Mike Dewar, probably you should send a message to both of us and say, look, you're searching for the same person, maybe you know each other, that kind of thing. So figuring out the right kind of techniques to do that in a smart way and not spam people is the longer term data project. To support that and the statistics dashboard, I've already started building out a Python toolkit that's going to be open sourced for doing statistical summaries where some of your statistics depend on other ones. So in this case, we're making a lot of calls to their database to pull data in. We don't want to have to take 6 hours to build the dashboard, so the system is going to be set up that it can understand, okay, in order to get the top 10 people who have sent messages in the last month, I need some sort of object that is all the messages in the last month thing. Well, by the way, something about the number of messages that were responded to can use the same data set. So rather than having to pull data repeatedly or just pollute the same namespace where everything's all in one big pile, it'll let me now and them in the future intelligently add new statistics. So that's one of the things that's going to come out of this project as well. If anybody, If anybody wants to talk about the project, I can't share any data, but I'm absolutely happy to listen to any ideas you've got or anything else. My name, again, is Max Shron, and I'm a data strategy consultant here in New York. So, thank you.
So once again, it's my great pleasure to welcome Anoush Tatevossian, who's going to talk to us about her communications work at the United Nations Global Pulse Project.
Hi, can you hear me? Is that all right? More? How about now? Oh, good idea. I'll just speak into it better. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Global Pulse is a big fan of DataKind, and so we're really very supportive of everything that's being done by building up this community of practice, and very excited about the expansion of DataCorps and all of these things. So we're really glad to be a part of this and watch this community grow, because we'll be needing you soon. So first, I just want to reiterate the caveat that I'm communications and partnerships for Global Pulse. I am not a data scientist in any way. I couldn't be further from one. So I apologize if my presentation is going to be a little bit high level and layman speak rather than really technical and really into the data. But I did speak to my data scientist on Skype today, and he gave me some keywords on some of the projects that I'm going to try to use so that it's a little exciting for you guys. So what is Global Pulse? First of all, I'll try to go quickly because I'm not sure if there's some people in here who have already heard about this project. But it is an innovation initiative launched by the Secretary General of the United Nations. So the focus of our innovation is trying to understand how we can better bring in real-time data into the UN system. The initiative was launched out of the recognition that we don't have enough real-time data about what's happening to people as things happen. And it was particularly a response to the 2009 global financial crisis, where things were happening, people were losing jobs, people were losing homes all across the world, not just in the United States. I mean, the reverberations were global. And the traditional tools that are used in governments and development organizations, official statistics, census, surveys, which are very statistically rigorous, and it's been used for a long time, and there's a lot of discipline and a lot of research behind all of those things. They're just not real time enough, for the world we live in today, where things happen so quickly. They're very important, and they will continue, and we do our best when we talk about Global Pulse not to step on the toes of those practitioners, but it is true that sometimes it takes too long to get those kinds of statistics verified. 2 years later, it's too late to know that there was a spike in unemployment in this region, when if you could have known much sooner, programs could have been put in place, social protection programs could have been strengthened. And so that was the impetus for this organization, for this project, for Global Pulse. Now, the idea basically was that where can we get better real-time information? And this is where we sort of, over a long time of doing a lot of consultations and research, settled upon the emerging trend of big data. It's clear that there is a rise of real-time data that people are producing all the time passively and going about their daily lives. And the private sector is already using big data for improving lots of operations, better understanding customers, giving real-time feedback, making better decisions. So the question we stand here as Global Pulse to pose is whether big data can help global development. The work of the UN and its partner agencies and nonprofits that work in the fields of alleviating poverty and hunger and more. Disaster relief, migration efforts, education. So it's a big hypothesis, is what it is. But it's clear that there is a there, because the growth in digital services, even in the developing world, is massive. I'm not going to go through all my slides, but just a really quick one to look at. In Nigeria, in 2002, 100,000 mobile phones, active subscriptions. By 2012, 100 million mobile phone subscriptions. And the numbers keep rising. And people are using mobile phones, people are using mobile services, people are using social media. Clearly not at the very bottom of the pyramid, but the uptake is happening. And in a few years' time, even 5 years' time, 10 years' time or less, it will be much more. And so it's good to get ahead of the curve and start to understand how these new digital data sources could be useful. We think there's a number of opportunities for using better real-time information, better early warning, better real-time awareness of what's happening while it's happening to better inform policies and programs, and getting real-time feedback. So we have an idea that first we need to talk about this. It's not an understood concept in the world of international development, and it takes a lot of talking about. It's not even really a concept even in the private sector yet, but big data could have a public good element to it. And so that's where we're trying to raise the awareness so that there is an opportunity here. Through that awareness, we are very eager to embrace partners, partners from all sides of the equation. So partners who have data, partners who understand data science, partners in the development sector who are ready to try some of these new techniques, policymakers who are ready to sort of listen to this, through those partnerships, we try to innovate and develop new capacities. So I will tell you a little bit more about how we're doing that. But quickly, who we are. So this presentation was billed as data science at the UN, but just to remind that the UN is massive. It's at least 15 separate agencies and programs and bodies, so UNICEF, UNDP, World Food Program, all of them are actually independent agencies with their own governance structures, their own directors, their own budgets. So the umbrella UN, we work out of the Secretariat, the Secretary General's office, in an effort to sort of have an influence over the whole family, but it's more of at a policy level. So I also wanted to give the caveat that we aren't always building and churning out awesome data projects and things, because part of our job, a good chunk of our job, is sort of translating this to policymakers and decision makers. But we have to try to talk the talk as well. So what you'll see from my presentation is that we're both doing high-level presentations, talking to governments, talking to policymakers, talking to the leaders of the UNDPs and the World Food Programs and UNICEFs of the world to start familiarizing them with some of these concepts. So we're also doing projects with colleagues like all of you to show what we mean, so we can sort of show and not just tell. What does our team look like? Well, we're a very small team here in New York, headquartered in New York. We're a lab. We function like a lab. We have a few colleagues from different UN agencies who are on loan to us. We have some data scientists. We have some communications and partnerships people like myself. We have data engineers, and we're sort of all cycling in and out. A privacy officer, very important. And that's the sort of structure of a core Pulse Lab team, or Global Pulse. We call ourselves a Pulse Lab. So I'm just going to go through 3 areas of our work very quickly, as much as I can, to try not go over. One is that we're comprised of a network of Pulse Labs. One is the Global Pulse headquarters office, which we call Pulse Lab New York. We just opened Pulse Lab in Indonesia, and we'll be opening Pulse Lab in Uganda this year. Then I'll go into what our partnership strategy is and why partnerships are so important, and finally, we'll spend more time on, well, I think I flipped the order in my presentation, so anyway. First, then I'll talk about R&D, and then about partnerships. So the idea of a Pulse Lab is to do what I've been talking about in an operational way. So we want to create a sort of a hub, a space for bringing together the data, the tools, and the expertise needed to sort of start experimenting with big data for development. As I mentioned, we have New York, and we just opened Jakarta some months ago, and this year Kampala in Uganda. What we do out of these Pulse Labs is try to provide not only some sort of thought leadership, as I've described, but also that nuts and bolts on the ground, learn by doing opportunities. So we try to do collaborative R&D with our UN colleagues, UN system colleagues, and government colleagues in those countries as a service. So this complicated illustration is sort of trying to show the way our innovation as a service, or our collaborative R&D as a service idea works. In all cases, we need a client. We need a problem statement, similar to like DataCorps. We need a UNDP or a UNICEF bureau to say, we are actually intrigued by what you're saying, and yes, we want to see if you can use tweets to understand how people feel about immunization. That then can help us do better at campaigning for immunization. So we need the political will, and we need a client. We need a problem statement. And we need data. Well, we need a proposal. Then we need data. We need tools. We need expertise to sort of make the projects happen. And then what we want to do is share what we learn very widely. We put a lot of our research and methods papers online, and continue the cycle of advocating and explaining and sharing. So this is what the part I wanted to focus on most. I'll go through a few of our projects quickly because I thought they would be of most interest to this audience. In the proof of concept phase of Global Pulse, so a lot of 2011 and 12, we did a number of projects, which are all online on our website. But here, just to go through a few of them, and this is where I got some tips on how to explain some of them in a most interesting way for you guys, I hope. One of them was working with a company called Jana that has a very large global platform for sending out surveys and SMSs in multiple countries at the same time. And they usually do it for market research. So Toyota might hire them to blast out questions about, if you answer this question, you'll get 5 cents. Do you prefer a Toyota in red or a Toyota in green? And it helps them with their market research efforts. So we decided, could we use the same technology to blast out questions that have to do with human well-being? How much food did you, how many hours did you work over the past 7 days? Or how did you feel over the past 7 days? And it was just exploratory. We just tacked on a few questions. They did it pro bono for us. And then we got back the data. It went out to 30 countries in 15 languages, and we got 90,000 answers in about 3 months. DataKind, which used to be called Data Without Borders, I did the throwback logo, helped us clean some of the data. And just to quickly mention one thing that was of interest from that experience was that some of the questions were multiple choice, so those were sort of easy to sort, but some were open. So there was a challenge there, an analytical challenge, because there was a question, what would you do with $10 if you had $10 extra? And if the answers were, I would give them to give it to charity or give it to an NGO, that's really the same answer. So we had to do some semantic categorizing of those, of those answers. And we also had to geolocate the survey answers, because it was also open-ended. So if you ask people, where are you? And they wrote Cartagena, you don't know if that's Cartagena, Colombia, or Cartagena, Spain, if they didn't specify. So there was a little bit of cleaning of that data that we had to do. So we had a really great time working with DataKind, messing around with that data, and then PopTech helped us develop an app where you can play with the data. The app is called World Rebalancing, and it's on the App Store. So, this was a good experience for us to know that if the UN were to do these types of surveys more often, you need better ways to classify open answers, you need better ways to disambiguate locations, etc. It was a good learning experience. Another project we worked on was looking at unemployment through the lens of social media. We worked with SAS, the analytics company SAS, and so in that case there was no data access challenge because it's a proprietary tool and it's massive and it's able to suck in lots of big data pretty easily. So we wanted to know, can you detect early trends before an unemployment spike? And we looked at the US and we looked at Ireland because it's in English. And they were able to quickly filter out a massive corpus of data of blogs and forums and comments related to keywords having to do with unemployment. And then what we tried to do is, what their tool does is filter the data and does semantic analysis on the data. And what we wanted to do is cross-correlate the curve with unemployment data. So if you look at the social media chatter, how does it compare with the official unemployment figures in Ireland and in the US. This is not a quick visualization, but again, I just wanted to share with you some of the challenges, and one of them was taking data that's unstructured from news, let's say, and blogs, and matching it against official data and official statistics about unemployment and seeing what's relevant and what tools to use. And so what we found was there are certain keywords and leading and lagging indicators. For example, after an unemployment spike in the US, you see people chatting more about downgrading their car or taking public transportation or being concerned about being able to pay grocery bills. There's keywords that you see spiking before and after the unemployment changes. All of these are online, so you can see more about them. Another one we looked at was tracking food prices by scraping websites. So Price Stats was our partner. Price Stats has a technology that scrapes prices from online supermarkets and builds an index of prices. And it's daily instead of month by month, which official inflation statistics are generally month by month. So it's much faster, and it was another demonstrative experience for us to show our colleagues in positions of decision making that there are ways to get this data faster than we currently are with our traditional tools. And we partnered with them to make a bread price index for 6 Latin American countries, so we could see the daily prices of breads as compared to the monthly consumer price index. And you can see that it's pretty close, the data that comes from just scraping websites. And the last one of the last ones I'll show you from the last round of proof of concept projects was looking at news trends in the news having to do with the emerging food crisis. The corpus of data was French language news from Africa, and we wanted to see how does the news coverage change in talking about food crisis over time. And we worked with these incredible researchers in Paris, led by the Institute of Complex Systems, and they created a very interesting visualization that's live online you can play with. But what we did through consultation with our World Food Program expert colleagues is develop a taxonomy of the keywords that we thought would be relevant to, if you were a journalist writing about a food crisis, what are the keywords you would use? So we had a taxonomy to start, but there weren't clusters until they started doing the research. And they found that there were some distinct clustering of themes that happened over the number of years that we looked. So they looked from 2005 to 2011, and you could see that the news media picks up certain thematics that become the trend in telling the narrative of the food crisis. And it's no surprise really that it sort of ends in talking about social unrest after several years of the food prices are going up. That eventually becomes the theme of the day is the social unrest implications. And then this HunchWorks is a tool that we started working on. It was going to be, or it is still in development, an intelligent social network that tries to connect experts who have hunches about something emerging and make it easier for them to find each other and make it easier for them to share data sets so they can verify more quickly. Because a lot of times experts have an idea that a drought is happening or a food price spike is about to happen, but they don't tell each other until it's too late. So this tool is supposed to help that, but I can tell you more about that. I don't want to run over time. Very quickly, some of the projects we're working on this year, in case it is of interest to anyone who would want to help out. We're always looking for partners. We're looking at deeply into Twitter in Indonesia out of our Pulse lab. We're using, for now, the tool that Crimson Hexagon has called Foresight to see how people chat, what the chatter is like around issues related to food and fuel prices. For example, the government last year was considering cutting a fuel subsidy. And so we were monitoring tweets in Bahasa Indonesia with our team over there who speaks fluent Bahasa because they are Indonesian. They've been trained on the tool, and so they've been monitoring sort of the chatter and the fluctuations. And this seems like a no-brainer for someone who works in branding or brand monitoring, but it's just not really being used. These tools aren't really being used for public policy yet in these ways. So this is our effort at trying to understand what is the volume of chatter on social media. Is this a reliable platform? How do people talk about these issues, and how is it affecting their lives? We are this year also going to do some research on mobile phone call detail records. There's been some incredible research done at the cutting edge by academics mostly, looking at how mobile phone data can be very useful for understanding population movement, migration, socioeconomic levels. You may have heard in the news after the Haiti earthquake, a research group called FlowMinder looked into the data from Digicel to see where people were migrating before the cholera outbreak, sort of to understand where people were moving and where the disease could be going. That's based on CDR analysis. Telefonica research in Spain has also done some interesting work looking at how you can understand people's socioeconomic level by looking at their mobile phone usage and behavior patterns. So we're partnering with Axis, one of the telecom providers in the country, who's going to give us some data under NDA to work on creating a sort of a real-time or close to real-time heat map of movements and see what we find. Another project that's active right now, and my colleague Renee is here, so if anyone is interested in this one, please talk to him. There is an effort underway in the UN right now to restructure the Millennium Development Goals. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with those, but those are sort of the guiding principles of a lot of development projects over the last 10 or 15 years. And they were listed as the Millennium Development Goals that were supposed to be reached by 2015. We're almost at 2015, and so there's this major policy craziness going on of trying to, what now, after this framework has expired, what now do we use as our framework for guiding development work? And sustainability is an issue, energy is now an issue, things that were not in the first round of 8 issues. So in general, what happened when they developed these whenever they developed them in 2000, I believe. It was closed door meetings, policymakers just sort of coming up with some ideas. Now they're trying to make it more inclusive. They're encouraging public contributions. People are chatting about it. People are debating about it. But in addition to the channels that the UN and its colleagues and its partner agencies have opened, people talk about the issues related to development anyway, in regular everyday speak, in social media, and in news articles. They may not put it in those framework words, but if you're talking about tuition is so expensive, you're talking about education. So what we're trying to do as an example to show the decision makers that there's value in the chatter and social listening is to sort of start analyzing tweets for themes that are related to these areas, topic areas that are being considered right now. It's an interesting challenge. It's a big task because, again, with the UN, we need to do it in multi-languages, so that's quite a challenge. And we also want to find the sort of real language, everyday speak for things like gender equality, right? If I'm tweeting about something, I'm probably not going to use gender equality. I might say women still don't make enough money or whatever. So we're building a taxonomy of the real world language that people use to talk about these issues, to give us sort of a sentiment, an idea of what the sentiment of the public is and which of the issues matter most to them. This is a small project. I just threw it in there because I wanted to put it out there. It's not a big data challenge. This is the fact that through the course of these consultations that the UN is doing, they've also been doing it in a formal way. They've got lots of PDFs and lots of Word documents of people who have expressed their opinions about this and this and this. They want to make those available to people to play with as well. We just have a small question for anyone who might know. What is the best way to liberate that data? To put those PDFs and those Word documents in a way that it's just online and people can play with them. It's not a big data challenge, it's just sort of a data liberation problem. And if you have a tool or a suggestion, please let us know. And the last one is we're also going to embark on another exploration to see if people talk about access to finance on social media in Kenya. So do people say, I'm trying to get a loan and I can't, or I can't find any information about banking in my region. So just to get a sense, what is the chatter like? It's a feasibility study. If it goes well, we'll have more phases to it, but it's an example of the type of work we do. And to quickly wrap up, I know I'm now over, is that all of this can't be done, none of this can be done without partnerships. I will not go into this crazy diagram, but it just means that all of our projects have a lot of components. As I mentioned, the ingredients are you have to have a client or a problem statement that comes from inside the development community that we work. We need data. We need experts. We need privacy officers and privacy considerations. And so we are both doing that through our projects, but we're also advocating for those things. So we're advocating a lot, talking about big data privacy and human rights. We're advocating a lot and talking about how a lot of big data is really closed data. And it's very expensive to buy if you wanted to really use it in an operational context, and that's just not feasible if we want to operationalize the use of big data for development. So we talk about data philanthropy, or sort of a movement perhaps one day towards open private sector data. And we also are seeking partners on all fronts. Data philanthropy, partners who have software, computing power, storage that they want to sort of put to use for new challenges that they never thought of before. Human expertise to work in our labs, partners to work in the labs and support for events, research, toolkits, etc. Thank you. Oh, sure. I'll try my best. Yes. Any questions? I'll give you a moment to digest. Or we can take questions for anyone? Or shall I stay up a little longer?
Are there really no questions? Please.
So I think, a lot of technologists are liberally, that's what you get from the crowd, and a lot of us actually want to participate, and that's why things like DataKind exist. But let's say you go full throttle and you want to do work in the public sector. Speaking for myself, but maybe others, technology moves fast, and I have fears that the public sector moves too slow for my patience level. What would you say to somebody who's maybe young and saying, well, I know I can go get a job at this and that, and the economy's buzzing, but maybe I want to do something with this city or with the UN or with level of government, but I'm afraid I'm going to be in a bureau nightmare.
Yes. The public sector does move way too slow these days, especially compared to the pace of innovation. But there are pockets, I think, in the different organizations where you can find rogue teams that are trying, like in the city and like some various parts of the UN, not everywhere. And I think these organizations like DataKind are very good to help sort of bring these people to light and connect those dots. There are projects like this and different agencies that are working on that. On the whole, it is probably moving too slow, but we just need more political will as well, but we have to show them what's possible so they understand why. At the end of the day, there will still be roadblocks that can't be undone. I was at a presentation recently from someone from the city talking about, just in general, procurement of technology in the government setting is just, but for good reason perhaps, I don't know, is slow because of all the checks and approvals that have to happen, and it just doesn't work when you're trying to be more agile and come up with the right tool at the right time. So it's not a very good answer except for try to network with the people who might know a little bit about the institutions that you're interested in, and they might be able to guide you to the spots inside those massive organizations and institutions where there is a little bit of opportunity to move and not just get broken down.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit about the open positions at UN Global Pulse?
Yes, I should have, yes. Well, we were trying really hard to find data scientists for Jakarta. If anyone is interested in moving to Indonesia, we are still taking applications for that. And also a Pulse Lab manager in Jakarta. So someone who is a little bit of a jack of all trades and a good manager to manage a lab environment, but also interface with the UN and the government folks for Jakarta. We will be needing all of the same core team in Uganda shortly. So we will need a Pulse Lab manager, we will need a data scientist, we will need a data engineer, we will need, yes, at least those things that are relevant to you guys. And in New York, we just closed the hiring for data scientist and data engineer and interns for both of those categories, but hopefully we'll be going again, and as we get more projects, so like the Millennium Development Campaign one that I was showing you, this was a project that they really wanted to do, and so they supported us, and we hired a consultant to work on this project specifically. So as we get more of those projects up the pipeline and we secure enough buy-in that we can bring in someone to work for a few months or for a while on any of these given projects, then we'll advertise those on our website too.
Any particular reason for Indonesia and Uganda as the first labs?
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. I think one of
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. Why are the labs in Indonesia and in Uganda to start? So this project, because it straddles the world of trying to be hands-on and talk the talk, but also sort of high-level and political, we are at the end of the day in the Secretary General's office. So, and it's an open initiative, and it has to be voluntary to our member state governments. So we didn't pick the lab countries. We were sort of explaining this idea and seeing what came back. And Indonesia was actually one of the first, because both they are at risk for a lot of natural disasters, and it's a middle-income country, but there are a lot of vulnerabilities, and there are risks there. But at the same time, it's a rising country, and they are extremely digital. They are like the third most tweeting country in the world, which is nuts. But they're very prolific on social media, and a lot of mobile phone use, and an emerging sort of open source tech community as well. So that was actually a great location to have our first lab. And Uganda also, it was a long time coming. It's been hard to sort of secure the funding for that, but they have a lot of mobile phone penetration and mobile money. And so there we probably will focus less on social media and more on what analytics can we derive from the mobile phone action. Yes?
So do you have a sense of how much people know that you're listening? If someone says that the milk is too expensive or something, do you find that culture understands that if they tweet it, that it'll be heard? Is that?
I think that's the next wave. So for now, our projects have been relatively small scale and just demonstrative, so we haven't, had the opportunity to really show. But I think that will be one of the eventualities out of the Pulse Labs especially. Probably out of New York, not really, because our projects are a little bit more global or high level. But once we are really working on the ground at a community level in Uganda and Jakarta, part of the effort of the lab will be to sort of talk about what we're doing, share what we're doing, and really start that culture of feedback loops. I mean, the only way this will be useful is if that starts to happen, and policymakers pay attention. That's a whole other thing, but we're working on that too. Yeah.
So you mentioned this is a proposal-driven process. I mean, you're serving a client base.
Yeah, so to speak.
Whether that's client or governments or agencies within the UN who are looking for this. So after 2 years now, actually a little more than that, do you find that there is that uptake of, investing in your mission and seeing the value that you provide? Can you talk a little bit about that, like where is that really taken off, whether it's in the UN or in the client state, member states, and where you see that going?
Yes. So the first batch of projects I showed you, if you notice, they didn't have a client. It was just us talking to people like SAS or Crimson Hexagon or Price Stats, dreaming up, oh, this is an interesting hypothesis, should we test it? There was no client because there was no way someone politically from one of the agencies or governments would want to explore this because it was like sort of science fiction. But we used those projects to demonstrate. And it was a little bit of a climb, but I think that it also helped that we finished those projects, started to showcase them, and we showed them to the whole General Assembly. The Secretary General opened that event. We did a lot to call attention to the work that we had done. Also, all of the work you guys have been doing has been in the mainstream media all of a sudden last year or so. And so it started to resonate. And so then we got invited slowly by some unit in World Food Program, like, could you come do a brown bag and explain that again? Or same in UNICEF, but we heard you guys were doing this thing on perception analysis, could you come explain that to us? And so it was like slow building, and now we are starting to see that ready to tip our toes in the water to say like, okay, can we try this project with an actual use case or a problem statement?
Just do one more.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision to use the partnerships with these kind of proprietary tools that are closed instead of developing a tool set that then gets open sourced and maybe built from outside, or are you moving in that direction?
Yes, the spirit of the initiative has always been to get to an open source toolkit. We used to talk about it a lot more because we thought it could be happening much faster than it really can. But that is the spirit and the goal. So it's, right now we'll use the tools that we can and that exist, but as we expand our team and have more of a presence and have more experts on our teams and in our labs, the goal is to get to a point where we have an open source toolkit, because we can't, even if we prove this is so successful, you can't really look to a small UN agency or an NGO or a government in a developing country and tell them, this works really well and it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to get the data and the tool. So at some point, I don't know what the timeline will be realistically, but the goal is to get as many open source solutions and free access as possible.
Can I just follow up quickly? Do you find you waste a lot of time moving from tool to tool every time you have to learn a new?
So far we've been partnering, so our partners sort of catch us up to speed. This year we'll see how much time we lose trying to determine which tool to use in which instance. But yeah, it's been a learning curve, the whole thing.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was awesome. I'm just going to say a few words and then we're done. So can we once again thank our sponsors, Green Plum and AOL, for the space. And let's thank Craig, who is probably hiding somewhere, but did all the hard work. He's back there. Did all the hard work for this event. And finally, all of the speakers are still here, so if you still have burning questions for them, come and grab them. Let's all make the world a better place. Have a good night.